In this slide, we are entering one of the most revolutionary aspects of Quintilian's thought, his theory of education. The title says, A Revolutionary Pedagogy, Books 1 and 2. The word pedagogy simply means the method or philosophy of teaching. So, this slide explains, how did Quintilian think children should be educated? Remember, Quintilian was not only a critic of literature or rhetoric. He was also one of the earliest thinkers who studied the psychology of learning. In Institutio Oratoria, especially in books 1 and 2, he explains that the foundation of a great orator begins in childhood. A person cannot suddenly become an excellent speaker at the age of 20 or 30. The qualities of confidence, discipline, knowledge, and communication must be developed from an early age. Now let us compare two approaches. The left side shows standard Roman practice, and the right side shows Quintilian's way. This comparison helps us understand why Quintilian was considered a revolutionary educator. Standard Roman practice. Let us first look at the traditional Roman educational system. The first point says, physical beatings, flogging, whipping. In ancient Rome, physical punishment was a common method of maintaining discipline. Teachers often believed that fear was necessary for learning. If students made mistakes, failed to memorize lessons, or behaved improperly, they could be beaten. The idea behind this method was, punishment creates obedience. But Quintilian questioned this belief. He asked, does fear really create a love for learning? His answer was no. According to him, a child who studies only because of fear may obey the teacher, but the child will not develop curiosity, creativity, and independent thinking. Let us understand this with a simple example. Imagine two students preparing for an examination. Student A studies because the teacher threatens punishment for low marks. Student B studies because the teacher explains the importance of knowledge and encourages interest. Both students may score marks, but after 10 years, who is more likely to continue learning? Student B. Why? Because one learned through fear, while the other learned through inspiration. Quintilian believed education should create lifelong learners, not frightened followers. The second point says, fear-based compliance. The word, compliance, means simply obeying rules. In traditional Roman education, students often obeyed because they were afraid of punishment. They followed instructions, but they were not always encouraged to question, discuss, or think deeply. For Quintilian, this was a major problem. Education should not produce silent students. It should produce intelligent citizens. A classroom should not be a place where students are afraid to make mistakes. Instead, mistakes should become opportunities for improvement. For example, if a student gives a wrong answer, a good teacher does not immediately insult the student. A good teacher asks, "Why did you think this way?" Then the teacher guides the student toward the correct answer. This creates understanding. That was Quintilian's approach. The third point says, isolated private home tutoring. Many wealthy Roman families preferred private tutors. They believed individual teaching at home was the best method because the child received personal attention. However, Quintilian saw limitations in this system. A child does not live alone in society. A future orator must communicate with different types of people. Therefore, education should also develop social skills. A student must learn how to express ideas, how to listen to others, how to participate in discussions, how to cooperate with classmates. This is why Quintilian supported public or group education. Now let us move to his revolutionary ideas. Quintilian's way. The first point says, explicit ban on corporal punishment. This was one of Quintilian's most remarkable ideas. He openly opposed physical punishment at a time when many people considered it normal. For Quintilian, beating students was not a sign of discipline. It was a sign of failure in teaching. Why? Because a teacher should influence the mind, not control the body through fear. He believed a good teacher wins respect through wisdom, patience, and encouragement. Think about a gardener. A gardener does not make a plant grow by force. The gardener provides water, sunlight, and proper care. Similarly, teachers should create the right environment for students to grow. This idea makes Quintilian one of the earliest supporters of child-friendly education. The exam point here is, Quintilian was one of the earliest Western educators to strongly condemn physical punishment. The second point says, use of games, praise, and competition. This idea is surprisingly modern. Today, many educational experts say that students learn better when they are interested and emotionally connected. Quintilian believed the same thing nearly 2,000 years ago. He argued that children should enjoy learning. Games can make difficult subjects interesting. Praise can build confidence. Healthy competition can motivate students. For example, suppose students are learning vocabulary. A teacher can simply ask them to memorize hundreds of words. Or the teacher can create a word game where students compete in teams. The second method creates excitement and participation. The students are learning, but they do not feel that learning is a burden. This was Quintilian's idea. Learning should attract the mind, not force the mind. The third point says, strong advocacy for public, group classroom schooling, Schola, to foster civic adaptability. This is another important contribution. The Latin word schola means school. Quintilian supported classroom education because he believed future citizens must learn how to interact with society. A future lawyer, leader, or public speaker cannot remain isolated. They must understand different opinions and communicate with different people. A classroom becomes a small model of society. Students learn cooperation, respect, debate, communication, responsibility. These qualities prepare them for public life. This connects directly with Quintilian's idea of the ideal orator. Remember, the ideal orator is not only a speaker, he is a responsible citizen. Bilingual education, Greek before Latin. Now let us look at the important point at the bottom of the slide. It says, insisted on a bilingual education, teaching Greek first to establish foundational grammar discipline before Latin. This is another important examination point. Roman education was deeply influenced by Greek culture. Greek was considered the language of philosophy, literature, and advanced learning. Quintilian believed students should first learn Greek before Latin. Why? Because Greek grammar provided a strong foundation. Once students understood language structure through Greek, they could master Latin more effectively. It is similar to learning mathematics. Before solving advanced problems, students must first understand basic concepts. A strong foundation makes advanced learning easier. For Quintilian, Greek provided the foundation. Latin developed professional expression. Together, they created a complete education. Final exam summary. So, if we summarize this slide, traditional Roman education depended on fear, physical punishment, isolation, forced obedience. But Quintilian introduced respect for children, learning through encouragement, games and motivation, classroom interaction, social development, bilingual education. His revolutionary idea was simple. A good education does not merely fill a child's mind with information, it develops the child's character, confidence, and ability to contribute to society. That is why Quintilian remains important not only in literary criticism but also in the history of education. In the previous slide, we learned how Quintilian believed children should be taught. Now, in this slide, he explains how education should progress step by step throughout a person's life. Look carefully at the picture. Instead of drawing separate boxes, the slide shows a staircase. This staircase is very meaningful. Why? Because Quintilian believed education is like climbing stairs. You cannot jump directly to the top. You must climb one step at a time. If you skip the lower steps, you will struggle on the higher ones. In the same way, a child cannot become a great speaker overnight. Every stage prepares the student for the next stage. The first step builds the foundation. The second strengthens knowledge. The third develops advanced speaking skills. Finally, the student reaches the highest level, called facilitas. Let us climb these educational stairs together. First stage, infantia, infancy. The first stage is called infantia, which simply means infancy or early childhood. Many people think education begins when a child enters school. Quintilian completely disagrees. He believed education begins from the very first years of life. Look at the slide. It says, focus on the moral atmosphere, correct accents of nurses, nutrices, and early linguistic habits. Let us understand this one by one. First, the moral atmosphere. Quintilian believed children learn by observing. Even before they can read books, they watch the behavior of the adults around them. If parents are honest, respectful, and kind, children naturally begin to imitate those qualities. But if children constantly hear lies, anger, or rude language, they may also imitate those behaviors. Therefore, Quintilian says education begins at home. The family becomes the child's first classroom. The parents become the child's first teachers. Now let us understand the second point. Correct accents of nurses. In wealthy Roman families, children were often cared for by nurses, called nutrices. Quintilian insisted that even these nurses should speak correctly. Why? Because children naturally imitate the language they hear every day. Imagine a baby learning to speak. The baby repeats the words spoken by parents. If the pronunciation is clear, the child learns correctly. If the pronunciation is incorrect, those mistakes become habits. Today, modern psychology agrees with this idea. Children learn language mainly through imitation. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Quintilian had already understood this. The third point says, early linguistic habits. Quintilian believed that vocabulary, pronunciation, listening, and speaking should begin naturally during childhood. Learning language should never be delayed. Just as a tree grows stronger from a healthy seed, good language grows from good early habits. Second stage, grammaticus, grammar school. After childhood comes the second stage. This is called grammaticus, or grammar school. Do not misunderstand the word grammar. Today we think grammar means nouns, verbs, and tenses. For Quintilian, grammar meant much more. Grammar was the complete study of language and literature. The slide divides this stage into two parts. Lower division. The lower division focuses on reading, writing, phonetics. Phonetics simply means the correct pronunciation of sounds. Students first learned how to read accurately. Then they learned writing. Finally, they learned how to pronounce words correctly. Think about constructing a house. Before decorating the rooms, we first build strong walls. Similarly, before studying great literature, students must first master basic language skills. Without these basics, advanced learning becomes difficult. Higher division. After mastering the basics, students entered the higher division. Here the education became much broader. The slide mentions critical analysis of poetry, geometry, music. Why would an orator study poetry? Because poetry teaches beautiful language, imagination, rhythm, and emotional expression. Why study geometry? Geometry develops logical thinking. An orator must organize ideas logically. Why study music? Music teaches rhythm, harmony, memory, and voice control. Notice something important. Quintilian did not want students to specialize too early. He believed a great speaker should have knowledge of many subjects. The more knowledge a person possesses, the richer and more convincing their speeches become. Third stage, rhetorical school. Now we climb to the third level. This is called the rhetor, or rhetorical school. Here students finally begin advanced rhetorical training. Everything learned earlier now comes together. The slide mentions three important areas. The first is advanced composition. Composition means learning how to write speeches and arguments in a clear and organized manner. Students were taught how to introduce a topic, present evidence, answer objections, and conclude effectively. The second area is declamation. This is an important examination term. Declamation means delivering practice speeches on imaginary situations. For example, a teacher might ask, imagine you are defending an innocent person in court. Or, imagine you are advising a king. Students would prepare speeches and present them before the class. This helped them develop confidence, reasoning, and speaking ability before facing real public situations. The third area is legal theory. Many Roman orators became lawyers or public officials. Therefore, they needed knowledge of law and justice. A speaker should not only speak beautifully, the speaker should also understand the principles of fairness and legal reasoning. Final stage, facilitators, ready fluency. Now we reach the highest step. This is called facilitators. Look at the exam trigger box. It says, facilitators means ready fluency and spontaneous, unscripted brilliance. This is one of the most important terms in Quintilian's educational philosophy. What does ready fluency mean? Imagine two speakers. The first speaker memorizes every sentence. If someone asks an unexpected question, the speaker becomes silent. The second speaker understands the subject deeply. Even without notes, the speaker can explain ideas clearly, answer questions, and adapt to different situations. Which speaker is more effective? Obviously, the second one. That is facilitators. It is not memorization. It is the ability to think clearly and speak naturally at any moment. Think about an experienced teacher. Students ask unexpected questions every day. The teacher does not read answers from a book. The teacher responds immediately because years of knowledge and practice have become natural. That is exactly what Quintilian wanted. He did not want students who merely memorized speeches. He wanted thinkers who could speak wisely and confidently in any situation. The main lesson of the staircase. Now look once again at the staircase. Every step depends on the previous one. Good family values create good childhood habits. Good childhood habits prepare students for grammar school. Grammar school prepares students for rhetoric. Rhetoric prepares students for fluent public speaking. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is skipped. Quintilian believed that true education is a lifelong journey of gradual development. Conclusion. The central message of this slide is simple. According to Quintilian, great orators are not born. They are carefully trained through a systematic process that begins in infancy and gradually develops language, knowledge, character, reasoning, and finally reaches facilitators, the highest stage of natural, confident, and spontaneous eloquence. For examinations, remember this sequence clearly: infantia to grammaticus to rhetor to facilitators. This four-stage educational ladder is one of the most important contributions of Quintilian's Institutio Oratoria and demonstrates his belief that lasting excellence is achieved through patient, continuous, and well-structured education. So far, we have learned three important things from Quintilian. First, we learned what kind of person an orator should be: a morally good person who is skilled in speaking. Second, we learned how children should be educated from infancy. Third, we learned the step-by-step educational journey that finally leads to facilitators, or natural fluency. Now an important question arises. Suppose someone has completed all this education. How does that person actually prepare and deliver a speech? Is speaking simply standing on a stage and talking? According to Quintilian, the answer is no. A great speech follows a systematic process. Just as a doctor follows certain steps before performing surgery, or an engineer follows a plan before constructing a bridge, an orator must also follow a clear process. This process is called the 5 Canons of classical rhetoric. The word canon simply means a fundamental principle or essential rule. These 5 canons explain every stage of creating and delivering an effective speech. Look carefully at the diagram. Notice that all 5 circles are connected like the gears of a machine. This is intentional. Each canon depends on the others. If one gear stops working, the entire machine stops. Similarly, if one canon is weak, the whole speech becomes weak. Let us understand each canon one by one. First canon, inventio, invention or discovery. The first canon is inventio. The word invention here does not mean inventing a new machine. It means discovering ideas and arguments. This stage answers one simple question: what am I going to say? Before speaking, an orator must gather facts, evidence, examples, quotations, stories, and logical arguments. Imagine that you are asked to deliver a speech on the importance of education. Can you immediately begin speaking? No. First, you need information. You may collect statistics. You may remember famous quotations. You may think of real-life examples. You may organize different viewpoints. All this work belongs to inventio. Think of a chef. Before cooking, the chef collects vegetables, spices, oil, and other ingredients. Without ingredients, cooking is impossible. Similarly, without ideas, speaking is impossible. That is why inventio always comes first. Notice on the slide that Quintilian discusses this mainly in books 4, 5, and 6. Second canon, dispositio, arrangement. Now that we have gathered ideas, what should we do next? Simply placing ideas randomly will confuse the audience. Therefore, the second canon is dispositio, which means arrangement or structure. This stage answers the question, in what order should I present my ideas? Think about writing an examination answer. If you begin with the conclusion, then jump to an example, then suddenly explain the introduction, your answer will become confusing. Instead, every answer follows a logical order. Introduction, explanation, evidence, examples, conclusion. The same rule applies to speeches. Imagine building a house. Having bricks alone is not enough. The bricks must be arranged correctly. Otherwise, the building collapses. Similarly, good ideas without proper organization create a poor speech. Quintilian discusses this mainly in Book 7. Third canon, Elocutio, style. Now we have ideas. We have arranged them. The next question is, how should we express them? This brings us to the third canon, Elocutio, or style. This is the longest section in Quintilian's work. Notice the exam trigger in the center of the slide. It says, Elocutio spans books 8, 9, and 10. This is a very important examination point. Why does Quintilian spend 3 books discussing style? Because he believed that even excellent ideas lose their power if they are expressed poorly. Imagine 2 teachers explaining the same topic. The first teacher uses confusing sentences and difficult words. Students become bored. The second teacher explains the same concept using simple language, interesting examples, and clear organization. Students understand immediately. The difference is style. Style is not about using difficult vocabulary. Style means expressing ideas clearly, beautifully, and appropriately. Quintilian also discusses figures of speech, literary elegance, emotional appeal, rhythm, and clarity in this section. For him, style should never hide meaning. Instead, style should make meaning clearer. Imagine wrapping a valuable gift. Beautiful wrapping attracts attention, but if the wrapping is so complicated that no one can open the gift, it loses its purpose. Similarly, beautiful language should help understanding, not create confusion. Fourth canon, memoria, memory. The fourth canon is memoria, or memory. Today, many speakers use mobile phones, teleprompters, or written notes. Ancient Roman orators had no such technology. They often delivered very long speeches entirely from memory. Therefore, memory became an essential skill. But Quintilian did not encourage blind memorization. He believed that true memory comes from understanding. When we understand ideas deeply, remembering them becomes much easier. Think about your favorite story. You may never have tried to memorize it. Yet you can retell it because you understand it. That is meaningful memory. Quintilian also encouraged mnemonic techniques to improve recall. This section appears mainly in Book 11. Fifth canon, actio or pronunciatio, delivery. Finally, we come to the last canon. Actio, also called pronunciatio, means delivery. This answers the final question. How should I present the speech? Even an excellent speech can fail if the delivery is poor. Imagine a teacher reading every sentence in a flat, emotionless voice. Students quickly lose interest. Now imagine another teacher using eye contact, proper gestures, voice variation, facial expressions, and enthusiasm. The same lesson suddenly becomes interesting. This is the power of delivery. Quintilian believed that an orator should control voice, pronunciation, facial expressions, body language, hand gestures, eye contact. Everything should support the message. Nothing should distract the audience. Notice that this topic is also discussed in Book 11, along with memory. Why are these called the 5 canons? Now let us look at the complete process. Imagine you are preparing for a seminar. First, you find ideas. That is inventio. Next, you arrange those ideas logically. That is dispositio. Then, you choose the best words and expressions. That is elocutio. After that, you remember your speech. That is memoria. Finally, you deliver it confidently before the audience. That is actio. Notice that every stage depends on the previous stage. You cannot arrange ideas before finding them. You cannot style ideas before arranging them. You cannot memorize something that has not been written. You cannot deliver a speech that you have not prepared. The 5 canons therefore form one complete system. Examination focus. For competitive examinations, remember 2 important points from this slide. First, remember the correct order. Inventio right pointing arrow, dispositio right pointing arrow, elocutio right pointing arrow, memoria right pointing arrow, actio, or pronunciatio. Second, remember that elocutio occupies the largest portion of Institutio Oratoria, books 8, 9, and 10. This shows how much importance Quintilian gave to effective expression and literary style. Conclusion. The central idea of this slide is simple. According to Quintilian, great speeches are not created by chance. They are produced through a disciplined 5-step process. Discovering ideas, organizing them logically, expressing them beautifully, remembering them thoroughly, and delivering them confidently. These 5 canons became the foundation of classical rhetoric and continue to influence public speaking, legal advocacy, teaching, politics, and communication even today.